Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily cover Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. And of course I have a Patreon and Discord, more info at the end of the video. Alright, I know some of you have been waiting for me to talk about this one. On February 4th, 2026, Paizo officially released the remaster of the Dark Archive book. If you're confused about what that means, here's a brief summary. A number of years ago, Paizo released their Pathfinder 2nd edition role-playing game, and then later, the book The Dark Archive along with others. Then a bunch of legal shenanigans happened involving Hasbro being just the worst, and in order to insulate themselves from further problems, Paizo updated their game to the Pathfinder 2e Remaster. It's largely the same game, but there's a few minor tweaks to keep them legally in the clear. Paizo has been slowly going through their backlog of books to update them to this newer version of Pathfinder 2e, and it was the Dark Archive's turn just recently. By the way, Paizo provided me a free copy of this book, but is in no other way compensating me. Now, the book isn't exactly new, it's just an update of the Pathfinder version that is post that Hasbro scandal. In fact, if you bought the old Dark Archive book for PDF, you should have gotten the new one for free. It basically contains a whole bunch of errata, more than one could put into an online document, and a few power balance changes. Okay, so here's the thing. The book has been the talk of the Pathfinder community for a hot minute because the book leaked early, and people are really angry about it. And don't worry, I'll get there. However, as always, I think parts of the community are overreacting, and it's not nearly as bad as people think it is. Let's get into it. First of all, the main selling point of the Dark Archive book is that there are 2 Pathfinder classes and a slew of spells discussed in it. Today I'm going to discuss the classes. So first I'm going to discuss the pre-remaster version of the class so you'll know what I'm talking about, then I'll discuss the changes, then I'll discuss the ramifications of those changes, and finally, my final thoughts on the matter. The first class we're going to talk about today is the Thaumaturge. The Thaumaturge is a type of character that uses a barely functional magical item combined with old wives' tales to put out some serious power. Think Van Helsing or the Belmonts from the Castlevania series. Thaumaturges are a martial class, meaning they don't have any spells, technically, but they are good at fighting. Many call them near martials because they can't use their key attribute, charisma, to hit monsters, so they tend to be a little bit less accurate than, say, a ranger or a barbarian. They make up for this with versatility. They can easily identify monster weaknesses, disarm haunts, and they have a slew of semi-magical items called implements that can help them or their allies. Thaumaturges have 3 big things going for them. One is that they can have an implement. This is a magic item that only works for them and gives them a special bonus. There are a number of different implements, such as a cup that refills with healing liquid, a wand that spews energy, or a lantern that reveals secrets. These implements can get better over time, and by level 20 a Thaumaturge should have access to 3 different implements. The second thing a Thaumaturge gets is that they can identify any creature's weakness with a class ability called Esoteric Lore. Now this is important. Esoteric Lore, despite having lore in the name, is not actually a lore skill, it is a class ability. Only the Thaumaturge gets Esoteric Lore. Anyway, they can use this to trigger a creature's vulnerability even if they wouldn't normally trigger it, and if the creature doesn't have a vulnerability, they gain a vulnerability to that Thaumaturge's attacks. It's a bit more complicated than that, but those are the basics. Finally, a Thaumaturge just straight up does bonus damage as long as their implement is in one hand. This limits their weapons that they can use. For example, they can't use a greatsword, but when combined with the ability to make up vulnerabilities, it lets a Thaumaturge do a lot of damage while still having a wide set of utility abilities. So what changes did the Thaumaturge get? Well, across the board it seems they got a net increase. Many of their abilities are the same, and some implements got better. The wand implement increased from doing 1d4 plus charisma modifier damage to 3d4. Also, it used to be that it could do d6s instead of d4s once every few rounds, and that recharge has been reduced down to once every other round, so that's really nice. The Chalice, that healing cup I talked about, now heals a bunch more. Thraben Yu did a video where he broke down the exact numbers, and it's looking pretty good. For an object that can heal once every 10 minutes and doesn't use up any resources, it's a really decent chunk of healing. And even after the healing's done, you can use it to hand out temporary hit points indefinitely. Ramifications, well, there's not much here. These are all net positives for the Thaumaturge, but nothing so egregious that it would throw off game balance. Looks like it all works pretty well. I do want to say that now with the wand being more powerful, it's possibly a good thing to build around. Before the remaster, the wand implement was kind of a joke, but now it does a decent chunk of damage, and if you upgrade it, it can flip between damage types, and at the highest levels, it even turns into mini fireballs. Pair it with like attacking with an air repeater from a distance for a third action, and you've got a decent little build there. Last ramification thing I'll mention is that the one thing I did want from the Thaumaturge actually didn't happen, and that was that they didn't clean up some of the wording. I've talked about this on the channel before, but I'll put it up again right now. The wording in particular of their one-handed weapon bonus damage thing isn't very good. It's up on screen right now so you can read it if you want. I'm sad that it didn't get fixed, but it's a minor complaint. Final thoughts? Well, the Thaumaturge didn't really need much in the way of buffs, and they were pretty good already. But the buffs that they did get were both useful and not game-breaking. I do want to point out before we go on how good the Thaumaturge is. I realize that they tend to be a bit less accurate than other classes, but they make up for that by doing a lot of damage. And sure, it's not as much damage as, say, a Barbarian, but the Thaumaturge also has a lot of utility. Can a Barbarian reveal hidden foes for all of their allies and also disable that haunt that requires a concentration check in the middle of combat? Probably not, because they're probably raging. Also, your typical Barbarian doesn't add damage to ranged attacks, and a Thaumaturge can without any additional feats. A Thaumaturge with a boomerang or a returning trident or heck even an air repeater can rack up some serious damage at range. But moving on to why we're all here, the Psychic. If you have been on the internet as of the posting of this video, you'll know that the Pathfinder community is really mad over the changes to the Psychic. And while I get where they're coming from, I think they're overreacting at least a little. Let's get into it. Okay, the original pre-remaster Psychic was pretty complicated. Firstly, they are a spontaneous occult spellcasting class. They only get 2 spells per spell rank, but they make up for that with amps, which is their primary gimmick. See, instead of spending focus points on special focus abilities, they can spend them to increase some of their cantrips considerably. For example, an Oscillating Wave Psychic can cast Ignition normally, or they can spend a focus point to amp it, making it go from 2d4 damage to 2d10, or 2d12 if they make a melee attack. That's really good. Speaking of Oscillating Wave, it's one of these psychic conscious minds. See, psychics get 2 subclasses. There's subconscious mind, which is kind of what fuels their psychic powers. Do they draw powers from their emotions, from real-world logic, from insane dream logic, that kind of thing. This subclass determines if a psychic is intelligence or charisma-based, and gives them some special abilities when they unleash their psyche. We'll talk about that in a second. The second ability they get is called Conscious Mind, and that's how their power manifests. Are they telekinetic? Do they have pyro and cryokinesis? Can they see the unseen or look into people's minds? That sort of thing. This subclass determines what bonus spells they get and also what those special cantrips that they can amp will be. It also gives them 3 unique cantrips that only work for them, though 2 of those cantrips come online after level 1. Also, 2 of their cantrips that they get are just better versions of a normal cantrip, like they have increased range or something. The last thing psychics have is Unleash Psyche. During combat, if they had cast a spell the previous round, they can unleash their psyche at the start of the current round as a free action. This does a few things. It increases the damage of all of their spells with a few minor exceptions. It also unlocks special Psyche Unleashed options, like the Emotional Acceptance Psychic can heal allies for a single action, that kind of thing. However, after 2 rounds of Psyche Unleashed, they fall out of it and become stupefied for 2 rounds and cannot re-enter Psyche Unleashed during that time. Okay, so what are the changes? Well, to be honest, there are not really any changes to the base Psychic. All of the changes come in the form of minor little tweaks to spells. The only major change here is that they can't amp a spell as part of another action. This mostly means that Maguses with Psychic Dedication can't spell strike with these Psychic amped cantrips, and there are a few other fringe cases as well. But the big thing that most people are upset over is the magic. In particular, the unique Tangible Dream Psychic Cantrip Imaginary Weapon was reduced from doing D8s for damage down to D6s for damage, an average reduction of 1 point per damage die. What a lot of people didn't notice is that the damage type was also changed from slashing or bludgeoning to force. Force is one of the least resisted damage types in the game. This is the only cantrip in the game that does force damage that I am aware of. So yes, against a standard enemy, the damage is going to be lessened, but now it bypasses anything that resists all physical damage. Ghosts, most devils, most vampires, most swarms, they all resist all physical damage. That includes slashing and bludgeoning. This new spell ignores all of that. So yes, your level 20 psychic does on average 10 less damage per hit with imaginary weapon, but also ignores the physical damage resistance of 20 against, say, an ancient adamantine dragon, so Another big thing is that the psychic archetype was changed and made worse considerably, and honestly, I think that's for the best. So despite the fact that a lot of people dislike psychic for being underpowered, whether that's true or not is up for debate, but that's what a lot of people say, the psychic archetype used to be one of the go-to archetypes. It gave a cantrip that was just better than a conventional version, like having extra range or something, and it also gave you a skill and a free extra focus point, and the ability to amp your own cantrips like a psychic. It made it very tempting for classes like Magus who could use it to supercharge their spell strikes, and I think that power was above the level that Paizo intended. Also, it gave out a free early focus point and was generally considered a must-take by some. Now it is considerably reduced in power, and you can see the changes on screen. By the way, there were a few other changes to spells. Some spells were made better, some spells were made worse. There's a few new feats. Thanks to this Reddit user who compiled the list, I'm not going to try and pronounce that name. Now, again, I know a lot of people were big mad over this change, especially the change to the archetype, but I think it was kind of required. If you have one option that's just far and above better than every other option, so much so that the community thinks you have to take it, well, that's a problem in my book, but that's just my opinion. So, what are the ramifications here? Well, the archetype is significantly reduced in power, obviously, probably down to around the power level of other spellcaster archetypes. In particular, the power ceiling of the Magus who wants to output as much damage as possible is going to be lowered, especially since they can't amp a D8 imaginary weapon into their spell strike anymore. Other than that, I don't see much in the way of huge changes, and before you get your torches and pitchforks, let me explain in my final thoughts. Oh, one minor thing, they did clean up some of the wording in Psychic. In particular, the Oscillating Waves Psychic's whole shtick was reworded to be a lot more clear, so thanks to Paizo for that. Alright, final thoughts. I personally don't think people are actually mad about the changes to Imaginary Weapon. And some are going to be mad that they can't spell strike as hard with the Magus, but like, Maguses already do a bunch of damage, my dude. No, the problem is that there was a bit of a power bump to most of the classes when they hit the remaster. And Psychic seems to have been passed by, and I get that. I would like to see Unleash Psyche maybe last 3 rounds, or maybe be able to re-enter Psyche Unleashed if you somehow got rid of the stupefied condition during that 2-round cooldown. Something, I don't know. And I get it, it's disappointing not to have that power bump. It was one of the weaker classes, at least according to Reddit and YouTube comments, and it didn't get a boost to keep up with the rest of the classes. But this isn't a betrayal or a bad thing or the end of the Psychic, it's a bit disappointing, that's all. So I'm appearing on screen right now because it's real talk time. I know exactly what this comment section on the video will be, and I know this because I've seen it before in other videos where people don't like what Paizo did. 90% of the comments are going to be fine, good faith arguments or people just feeling upset. But there's going to be a select few who are just plain vile, calling for terrible, violent things to happen to Paizo staff. People like Rue Dickey, the marketing person, who's not even in charge of any of the books. Rue is the nicest marketing person I have ever met, aside from my sister. She's also in marketing. Rue Dickey helps me liaise with Paizo, and guys, this channel would not exist without them. And Maya Coleman, their social media person, is much the same way. Don't attack these people for just doing their jobs. Listen, if you're upset over the Psychic, that's fine. Your feelings are valid. Go write a well-reasoned, calm letter on the Paizo forums and see if they won't give the Psychic some errata, bringing them up to par. One post probably won't change Paizo's mind, but if 100 people do it, they might listen. But yelling and screaming that you are going to firebomb houses, which yes, I have seen in comments on YouTube and Reddit, that isn't going to do anything except convince Paizo that you aren't worth listening to. So calm down, go do what you can, and don't be a jerk. All right, sorry for the downer ending here. Hey, as a reminder, I have a Patreon. I'm going to try and post something fun there once a month, but honestly, it's just a way to keep this channel financially viable. Just a few bucks a month, and I'm toying with the idea of adding a limited higher tier where you can request a specific video. Let me know what you think. I also have a Discord channel, link in the description. Drop by and say hi. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That tells not only me, but also YouTube that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming.